I never thought a simple wooden fence could spark such a storm. For more than 30 years, that fence had stood at the edge of my property. It wasn't fancy or new, but it carried memories. I built it myself back when my wife and I first bought the house. My kids grew up playing along that fence, painting it with their small hands when they were toddlers. To me, it wasn't just wood. It was part of my life. But to the HOA, it was nothing but an eyesore. The letter arrived on a warm Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch, sipping my tea, enjoying the gentle sound of birds. The envelope was stark white, with the HOA's logo stamped in the corner. I already knew it wouldn't be good news. Inside, the words hit me like a hammer: your fence does not meet current community standards. It must be removed within 30 days or you will face fines of $250 per day. I read it twice, then a third time, shaking my head. That fence had been there long before half of the HOA board members even moved into this neighborhood. And now they were demanding I tear it down? When my daughter, Laura, came by later that evening, I showed her the letter. She frowned, her hands on her hips. "Dad, this is ridiculous. That fence is part of the property. It's solid. It's not unsafe. They can't just bully you like this." I sighed. They can. They've got the rules in their hands, and they love throwing them around. But in my heart, I wasn't just angry. I was hurt. That fence represented my family's history. To tear it down would feel like erasing a part of my past. The next week, I attended the HOA meeting. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wanted answers. The board sat at a long table in the community hall. At the center was Carol, our neighborhood's self-proclaimed protector, though most folks quietly called her a Karen. She had that sharp voice that could cut glass and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Mr. Bennett," she began, folding her hands neatly, "thank you for coming. Regarding your fence, it no longer aligns with the updated community aesthetic. We need uniformity. Your fence stands out." "Stands out?" I repeated. "That fence has been there longer than you've lived here. It's sturdy. It's safe. And it's mine." Carol's lips tightened. "Rules are rules. Every homeowner is expected to comply. You'll need to remove it. Or else fines will apply." Around the table, a couple of the other board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. I leaned forward. "Let me ask you this, Carol. What harm is my fence causing? Has anyone complained?" She gave a thin smile. "This isn't about complaints. It's about maintaining property values." That was her favorite phrase, property values. She wielded it like a sword, cutting down anything she didn't personally approve of. I walked out of that meeting feeling both powerless and furious. Over the next few weeks, I tried reasoning with them. I sent letters, pictures showing how strong and stable the fence was. I even offered to repaint it. But every response was the same: remove it or face fines. True to their word, after 30 days, the fines began. Every morning, I'd get another notice in the mailbox, $250 added to my balance. It was like watching vultures circle above. Neighbors stopped by, whispering their support. Old Mr. Jenkins from down the street shook his head. "It's a shame, George. That fence is part of this neighborhood. Everyone knows it." I smiled weakly. Not everyone, apparently. The pressure grew heavier with each passing day. They weren't just trying to take down a fence. They were trying to break my spirit. Finally, with a heavy heart, I gave in. One Saturday morning, I gathered my tools. My hands trembled as I pulled out the first nail. Each creak of wood felt like a betrayal. Memories of my wife painting the posts, of my kids leaning over it to watch the neighbor's dog, flooded my mind. Laura stood nearby, tears in her eyes. "Dad, this isn't right. You shouldn't have to do this." "I know," I whispered. "But sometimes, they leave you no choice." Piece by piece, the fence came down. By sunset, all that was left was an open edge of my yard, bare and exposed. When I went inside that night, I felt hollow. It was more than just a fence they'd taken from me, it was dignity. But here's the thing about me, I don't break easily. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. The HOA believed they'd won. They thought they could push me around, that I'd just quietly obey. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't some newcomer afraid of their threats. I'd lived here for decades. I knew the community better than they did. And if they wanted to play games with fences and gates, well, I could play too. That's when the idea began to take shape. I remembered something from years back, when the HOA first installed their fancy entrance gate at the front of the neighborhood. It was meant to make the place look exclusive. They liked to boast about it during meetings. But what many people didn't know was that the land under that gate was still legally tied to my property line. The HOA never fully purchased the easement. They had permission to use it, but only as long as I allowed. And suddenly, I realized, if they could force me to tear down my old fence, maybe it was time I reminded them what they were standing on. For weeks, I kept my plan quiet. I did my research, pulled out old property records, and spoke with a lawyer friend of mine. Every detail lined up. The HOA's beloved entrance gate, the very thing they used to show off their status, was technically on my land. And I had every right to remove it. The thought made me smile for the first time in months. Still, I kept my poker face. At the next HOA meeting, I even sat quietly while Carol bragged about the new flowers they planted around the gate. But inside, I was already picturing the look on her face when she realized what was about to happen. Because if they wanted to see what it felt like to have something important ripped away, I was more than ready to show them. The breaking point came one morning when I received yet another letter, this time demanding I pay the fines they'd stacked up before I removed the fence. It was thousands of dollars now. I laughed bitterly. They really don't learn, do they? That evening, I called Laura. "Honey," I said, "I think it's time to teach them a lesson. Not with anger. Not with yelling. But with something they'll never forget." Her voice softened. "Dad, what are you planning?" I smiled. "Let's just say, if they took my fence, maybe it's time I take their gate." I didn't sleep much the night before I put my plan into action. My old fence was gone, and the bare edge of my yard stared back at me every morning as a reminder of what the HOA had taken. But this time, I wasn't going to let them have the last word. When dawn broke, I had my truck loaded with tools. Laura stood beside me, worry written all over her face. "Dad, are you sure about this?" she asked. I gave her a small smile. "I'm sure. They wanted to bully me over a fence. Let's see how they feel when I take something much bigger." The entrance gate stood tall at the front of our community, painted black with shiny golden letters spelling out the neighborhood's name. Every board meeting, Carol bragged about it as a symbol of unity and order. But to me, it was just a reminder of their arrogance. And more importantly, it was sitting right on my land. I started early, before most neighbors were awake. The air was cool, the streets quiet. As I pulled up to the gate, I could feel the weight of what I was about to do. But I wasn't afraid. I was calm, steady, and focused. I put up a small sign, "Private property, removal in progress." Then I set to work. The gate wasn't just decorative, it had electrical wiring, heavy posts, and concrete foundations. But I wasn't new to hard work. I'd built barns, sheds, and fences in my younger days. With the right tools, nothing stood a chance. The first sound of metal grinding filled the air as I cut through the bolts. Sparks flew, and piece by piece, the mighty symbol of order began to come apart. It didn't take long for the HOA to notice. By mid-morning, Carol herself stormed down the street, heels clicking angrily against the pavement. Behind her trailed two other board members, looking both shocked and panicked. "What on earth do you think you're doing, George?" she screeched, pointing at the half-dismantled gate. I straightened up, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and calmly replied, "Taking down my property." "Your property," she nearly choked on the words. "This is the community gate. You can't just destroy it." I pulled a folder from the truck and handed it to her. "Property records. The land this gate is built on? It belongs to me. You've been trespassing for years. You had permission before, but after what you did to me, that permission is gone." Carol's face turned red. She flipped through the papers, her hands trembling. This has to be a mistake." "No mistake," I said firmly. "And you'll find that every lawyer in town would agree with me. Now, you can either step aside, or I'll call the sheriff to make sure you don't interfere." The two board members exchanged nervous glances. One of them muttered, "He's right, Carol. I remember the old boundary lines." Carol glared at him, then at me, but she knew she was cornered. Word spread fast. By noon, half the neighborhood had gathered to watch. People stood on sidewalks, whispering, some even cheering quietly as I continued dismantling the gate. Mr. Jenkins from down the street chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, George, I'll be damned. About time someone stood up to them." Even kids were pointing and laughing, watching as the once proud gate was reduced to nothing more than a pile of metal and wires. Carol tried to rally support, waving her arms and shouting, "This is vandalism. He's ruining our community." But instead of siding with her, people began speaking up. "Vandalism? You forced him to tear down his fence," shouted one neighbor. "Leave him alone, Carol. He has every right," added another. For the first time, Carol realized she didn't have the crowd behind her. By sunset, the gate was gone. Every bolt, every post, every wire, removed. All that remained was an open road, free and clear. I stood back, covered in dust and sweat, and looked at my work. My heart was steady, but inside, I felt a deep satisfaction. They had taken my fence, something personal and precious to me. Now I had taken their pride and joy, the thing they used to control and intimidate the neighborhood. The balance had been restored. Of course, the HOA tried to fight back. The very next week, I received another letter, this one full of threats about lawsuits and damages. Carol had clearly written it in a fit of anger. But this time, I wasn't worried. I already had my lawyer involved. He sent them a firm reply. The gate was built on Mr. Bennett's private property without proper easement. He was fully within his rights to remove it. Any further harassment will be considered legal intimidation. After that, the HOA went silent. The neighborhood, however, was far from silent. For weeks, people came up to me, shaking my hand, patting my back. Many of them had their own horror stories about the HOA, unfair fines, petty rules, constant bullying. My stand had given them hope. One evening, as I sat on my porch, Laura joined me with a smile. "You know, Dad, you didn't just take down a gate. You showed everyone here that they don't have to be afraid." I nodded slowly, looking out at the street. Sometimes, it takes losing something you love to realize how strong you really are. The board eventually held another meeting. This time, the turnout was huge. Neighbors filled the hall, demanding change. Carol tried to keep control, but the pressure was too much. One by one, the board members resigned, until even she was forced to step down. A new board was elected, made up of people who actually cared about fairness and community, not just control. They reached out to me, offering to rebuild the gate properly, with my permission this time. I thought about it carefully, then smiled. No gate. Let's keep the road open. Let people come and go freely. This neighborhood doesn't need walls, it needs trust. And that's how it stayed. Open. Honest. Free. In the end, I didn't just win against the HOA. I helped free the whole neighborhood from their grip. And every time I look at the spot where the gate used to stand, I feel proud. Proud that I stood up for myself, proud that I protected my dignity, and proud that justice was served. Bullies may hide behind rules and titles, but dignity and fairness are stronger than any regulation. When you stand your ground with courage and patience, you don't just protect yourself, you inspire others to do the same. If you enjoyed this story and believe in standing up for fairness, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We share real stories of justice, dignity, and community, and your support helps keep them alive. Hit that subscribe button and join us for the next story, you won't want to miss it.